Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Hello, you're listening to the podcast. So there I was. It's how all great aviation tales begin. This is episode 168. They had their shoes on and everything.
Free falling out of the helicopter.
Free falling. And that isn't a Tom Petty song tonight. No, it was some EMTs out of Delaware.
I think he described them as rather plump.
Weeble wobbles, roly poly.
Which just helped me visualize this whole thing like a into the water. Yeah.
Right.
Probably not
dear God.
at all. No, not with purpose. And they had their shoes on.
I can just picture like a belly flop contest going on between those two guys, but you're going to have to go all the way to the end of this episode to hear what happened and how it happened. I mean, we were in the last seconds of this week's show to hear that they had their shoes on and everything. Brilliant. So.
Tell our listeners why we had sticks on. Sticks is our resident helicopter expert. And he had a rather unique position as a helicopter pilot. So tell them why we had sticks.
Yeah, so Sticks was our guest this week, and he was a Coast Guard rescue helicopter pilot. And so recently, as we're recording this, we're within 3 weeks of the terrible, tragic flooding and damage of the Guadalupe River in Kerrville, Texas. And so we brought him on to talk about the challenges of helicopter rescue, specifically with regards to river rescue when there are houses and trees and vehicles and power lines and everything else trying to kill you as the pilot and your rescue swimmer and all the people in peril. And so we wanted to highlight a little bit the people who hang their ass out every day of the week.
It's just a Tuesday for them. Right?
Yeah, it's a Tuesday. Yeah. Every day's a Tuesday in the Coast Guard or something like that.
He had some great and poignant insights.
To
what goes into that, and some of the crews that launched out of Corpus and probably Houston to help in that effort.
Yeah, and that's the other amazing thing, Fig. I mean, you and I, we did all the training. We dropped all kinds of amazing ordnance, and boy, was that a shit ton of fun. But these guys, every time they took off, with the rare exception of it being a training flight, was real world mission. They were out there doing it, hanging it out. So good stuff. A couple quick things we need to mention before we get into the show. First and foremost, we need to thank Dizzy. God bless you, Dizzy. He is a double tanker aircraft commander, and then another $35 on top of that. Help move us back to StreamYard. So hopefully all our technical difficulties are gone away. But thank you, sir. In spite of your mental deficiencies that cause you to crack your wallet and throw money at us, we're humbled.
In judgment, but we're sure appreciate it, and thank you.
Indeed.
Humbly.
Yeah. And let's see. Oh, so there was .us/giveaway. Please go there. Follow the links. Share the show. If you share the show to enough places, Facebook, Twitter, or X, or whatever it is, all these other things that we've got for you, you earn points. As you earn points, you become someone who can win a copy of the book Takeoffs and Landings by Alger Pete Peterson, given to us by his grandson, so that you would share the show. And we're deeply grateful to Dusty Peterson for doing that.
Right on.
On. So I don't know, Fig, what do you think? I think we should get out of the way and hear what Sticks has to say about hanging it out there over the Guadalupe River.
Let's get out of the way.
All right. Here comes Sticks. Any advice?
Don't share the controls with the other pilot when you're doing a rotor over the top on an intercept or some shit he was trying to describe. I'm still going to have nightmares for that shit.
Terrifying.
Here
comes
Here's
Sticks.
a true story about crossing the pond at night in the world's smallest cockpit on the tanker through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So there I was, 35 feet over the water at night. We're doing a medevac mission, and we've recovered one bag of a patient's or survivor's baggage, and I then call to my flight mech, and I say, okay, free fall deployment of the baggage is authorized. He proceeds to throw the baggage back out the side, and the survivor, who's now looking at the basket sitting on the deck, sees his last bag that he has in hand, shrugs his shoulders, and throws it over the side. So, yeah, in a nutshell,
that ain't good.
Yeah, we were close to our maximum weight limit, and we were not going to have the ability to take his bags. We told him. We put the basket down. He threw his first bag in. We brought that up. Said, yeah, nope. Free fall deployment of the baggage, and he just sort of took the hint and just decided to throw his other bag over the side. So,
You're the bag, dude.
yeah. Showed up with abdominal pain and positive suitcase sign.
There you go. All right. Well, that's how a frustrating rescue aviation tale begins. Greetings, everyone. Repeat here. Coming to you from New Hampshire. Where's my co-host?
I am in an undisclosed location in the northern part of Michigan.
Nicely done.
Yes,
the UP?
and it is. Well, I wouldn't call it the UP, but it is northern part of Michigan.
Oh, gotcha.
And it is our distinct pleasure to welcome as a guest Styx.
Absolutely.
Or either that or a kidney stone. Take your pick. So,
well, there's that. So,
but yeah, no, actually, I think what we're gonna talk about. I mean, I got one or two other stories I could, share, but I think we're going to talk a little bit about the flooding that occurred down in Texas and what my brothers and sisters in the Coast Guard pulled off.
Some amazing stuff, and they got some good publicity there. So. Yeah, as they did. Yeah, they should have gotten it. It is great. So, needless to say, thoughts and prayers to all the people devastated by that horrific disaster. And if you want to give to people who are in need, you could go to salvationarmyusa.org. They have a 97% rating for being transparent and helping out with that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but let's get right into it, Styx, because it seemed to me in watching what I saw on TV that this is not your ordinary rescue stuff. You're hovering over rushing water with trees, houses, cars, and other multi-thousand-pound objects, trying to sweep away everybody and everything in its sight. So it seems like it offers some extra challenges. What?
Just a few.
Yeah. So what's your training to even get started into something like that? How do you even get trained up to show up to a thing like that as an aircraft commander?
What's interesting is, generally speaking, as a general Coast Guard rescue helicopter pilot, either flight mech or rescue swimmer, you're not trained for that. So some of this is potentially put together on the fly. But the other piece of it is that we do have advanced helicopter rescue school, which involves where we do basically heavy surf. You're doing cliff rescue, some of the more specialized things and more advanced stuff. And we sort of touched on that with Quinny a little bit. But one of the things that I think is actually coming, and we're seeing more of this being done by the Coast Guard, and this is not something that is like uncommon to the Coast Guard, and that is that, we're seeing more response to floods, swiftwater rescue, especially when it, exceeds what the local resources can do. And that's sort of one of the things that we're seeing a lot more of. And, and I think that, the Coast Guard is always adapting, always changing. And I foresee that they'll probably be taking on some training for that. I have reached out to Air Station Corpus Christi in hopes to try and get the air crew on here. And I think I'm going to continue to press on that. And I think we'll be successful in doing so, because those are the people that we really need to talk to. But So that's part of it. So a lot of this also, I think, some of this credit has to go to our search and rescue planners, which are in the rescue coordination centers. These are the people that know what our assets are and are the ones that are launching them downrange. And, they're adapting. Their primary, training is on open water search where you have set and drift. But we're talking about moving bodies of water that are moving, hundreds of cubic feet per minute. And some of the stats on the amount of rainfall that they had down there is astounding. And I actually did look some of this up. So first off, the Guadalupe River surged by 26 feet in 45 minutes.
That's mind-boggling. I've actually tubed on that river. That's a fun place to go. And I'm sure you have too, Fig. Haven't gone to flight school in Central Texas.
Actually, I've never been there in my life.
You're kidding me. Oh, no. Okay. Wow.
When I went back and I also checked on the National Weather Service, they said they had posted warnings for 2 to 3 inches of rain per hour and then put out the most severe flash flood warning that they could put out. And when I sort of did the math on this, they're looking at about 17 million gallons of water per hour dumped. If you've measured that in 1 square mile, which equates to about 25 Olympic pools worth of water. And, and that's, to give you another perspective, that's 660,000 gallons in 1 Olympic swimming pool. So
those numbers just start turning into beyond the ability to, you can't put a swimmer into that, and that's because the volumes and the, how fast they're moving. So what it really boiled down to, and what I can sort of surmise, is a lot of those people actually managed to evacuate to higher ground. And that's actually one of the cooler things that had happened. There was a Coast Guard rescue swimmer that basically got put down in an area where there was a whole bunch of survivors, about 170 of them. And it's one rescuer versus 170. And he, triaged all of them and coordinated, which ones needed to get sent out first. And just did a stellar job with that. Did I read that or hear that was his first rescue? It was his first operational rescue. Yeah. Talk about baptism by fire, Wow.
And unless I'm mistaken, I think there was a post on it. They all got air medals or just DFCs. Actually, I think DFCs and I think air medals went to the pilots. And which is just and well deserved too. I mean, what they did was just amazing. But so there's in a case like this, what's going to happen is you're going to change and adapt your search patterns, and you're going to be doing like what we call barrier searches, and that's where you're going to be looking at the shorelines, and you're going to be looking at like the riverbanks. You're going to look at what become natural obstructions where people are going to get hung up, or or areas where they may have climbed up a tree, in the middle of that stream. And that then necessitates the swimmer to go down and actually pull people out of the trees, which is something else that they're not necessarily trained for. But there was a picture of a Coast Guard rescue swimmer getting ready to go out on one of these missions, and he had this whole backpack with him. And when you look at his backpack, there's actually like a 3/4 axe strapped to his backpack.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's something that they learned in Katrina, where put the swimmer down and they could then cut a hole into the roof of a house.
Sure. Okay.
And pull people out of the attic. So those are like some of the things that the Coast Guard has had to adapt to in terms of, when we're used to going out to a fishing boat where they actually have some degree of training in a lot of cases, hoisting people off of boats to now pulling people out of houses, dwellings, off of trees, out of cars. There's an interesting case that occurred up at Station Niagara near Niagara Falls where a car got stuck in the river, and it was during a flooding event. And there was this person on top of the car, and the car is literally going sideways in the water. And they put the swimmer down. The swimmer, I didn't even think had time to put the survivor in a strap, just literally grabbed hold of them, and they hoisted him off and did like an air taxi and brought him over to shore. So a lot of the techniques and things that they're going to be doing are going to be adapted on the fly. we have our standardized techniques that we use, which is often direct deployments of the rescue swimmer. And that process is usually getting into a stable hover, talking about where you want to put the swimmer down. The swimmer's then connected to the hoist hook. You pick your target, your flight mech. You then say, okay, rescue checklist part 2 for direct deployment of the rescue swimmer to whatever point. And then there, it's the flight mech that's conning, telling me where to go. And it's going to be, I'll be getting conning commands like forward right 5, forward right 10. And to the point where we're like, okay, we're over. They'll tell me to go slow. And then they'll say, okay, hold position. They'll be watching my altitude. And then we put the swimmer down where we want them. The swimmer gets himself secured. Often they disconnect. In a case like this with Swiftwater, we probably would not disconnect the rescue swimmer, but in some cases, what they will do is they'll put the swimmer down. If it's a person in the water, the helicopter is literally going to be flying formation on them as they're going downstream. And hopefully the swimmer can get the strap.
So who's seeing them? Can you see them?
No.
Or who's calling your formation to fly on the victim?
My flight mech.
Okay.
So, and that just gets super busy for them because you'll hear them, they'll be like, right 5, and you're going to be sort of sliding out of position. One of the things that we could potentially do, but it would be risky. I think there's some risks with it when you would do it in Swiftwater would be to back off a little bit, leave a little bit of extra belly in the cable. But that cable becomes something that's going to get snagged or hooked up on something. And, if your swimmer gets hooked up on that could be bad. But, so it's, a lot of it also comes down to the search piece. And that's like, where are the survivors going to be and how are we going to find them? And, that's sort of non-standard, but you're going to have barrier searches. We know that they can roughly go in this area. I had a case similar to that where I had hoisted 3 people off of the jetty, and I basically did a shoreline search and found 3 people from their boat that were stranded sitting out on one of the jetties. And, so that's some of what they're going to have to do. But I think what we're going to be seeing coming down the road is, the Coast Guard having to adapt and change. We're going to be seeing more of this, not less. And that's, past performance is the best predictor of future outcomes. And, we've seen an increase in the amount of, rainfall and flooding. And, we have to be more prepared for this. So, so I honestly foresee this is going to be an area where I think we're going to see some changes with the Coast Guard. There'll be some additional swelling. So here, Dizzy had a question. Moment you drop the rescue swimmer, they hit the moving water.
Yeah, the moment arm is, it's a lot of force.
They could pull on that, but that's where if the helicopter is going to move along with them, you could potentially still do that. And, as long as you're not pulling on the swimmer. And yes, there is some that could actually potentially result in something called dynamic rollover. One of the interesting things, there was actually an attempt, wasn't done by a Coast Guard helicopter, but there was an attempt to basically tow a boat using the helicopter, and it caused the helicopter to effectively roll over and, double over into the water, or basically roll into the water.
That's not good.
No, generally frowned upon.
Well, does the rescue swimmer ever have any control over the hoist, or is that only the flight mech?
That's only the flight mech.
Okay, so there's no control down there.
No, absolutely
which
not.
Makes sense. It's going to get, even if it's waterproof, it's going to get damaged.
Right.
So,
and, I do potentially, certain areas where they have more rivers, I'm thinking like Air Station Astoria, or maybe even Port Angeles, where you've got more moving water to potentially contend with. I think those areas are definitely going to be start picking up some training in the river. And I've done hoisting like on the Hudson, and that, and the boats are moving there, but they're just not moving at the same speed that you see with like a raging river like that. So. Right.
And you told us on the first show, we talked about the knucklehead who drove his boat car into the Schuylkill River.
The car into the Schuylkill River. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So Big, you've been awful quiet today. Not like you.
Well, he's been muted up because there's people in the background running around like crazy.
I got some activity going on around here. I'm trying to keep the extraneous noise down to a minimum.
Yeah. Quiet, you damn kids.
Yeah.
But, from the from the rescue swimmer perspective, and what I could say, all of a sudden to be put down and faced with like 170 survivors that you have to sort out and triage and it probably is a relatively newly minted EMT as well. It's probably a little overwhelming, but by all rates, it sounds like he did a fantastic job with it. And I think that there's, again, I don't think we can say enough about the adaptability of the U.S. Coast Guard. And, God bless, I love all of my other services, especially the Marines. And it's not just because you guys are here. But I don't think, the United States doesn't necessarily appreciate just how astounding the Coast Guard is and how adaptable we are until there's a disaster that occurs, and there's probably no better example of that than Katrina. And that decentralized leadership that the Coast Guard's well known for practicing. What they do is they often, we step back and we let the commanders who are on scene make the decisions in terms of pre-positioning helicopters. And, so they actually, moved helicopters back away from where the storm was going to hit, which then enabled them to bring the helicopters in almost immediately after the storm had passed and conditions were suitable for flying. And nobody was telling them to do that. The crews that responded to this case in Kerrville, and that's the other interesting. So these crews came out of Corpus Christi. They had to fly about 160 miles northwest up towards Kerrville, which is just about 16 miles north and west of San Antonio. And then, so they're right there. They're about an hour and a half. They've used up about half of their gas. Yeah. And now they've got to start, they landed, they found this large group of survivors. It sounds like they put their swimmer down and he decided, I'm going to say
you're on your own, pal.
Actually, it was his decision. He's like, I think I can make the best difference here by staying here to triage and sort out which patients need to go first. And then the helicopter can then take back off and now sort of make an assessment of the area, what needs to be done. And I'm certain at that point, they're probably also getting helicopters coming from Houston, but these are the B0 or the ready helicopters that are on call 24/7. And, as we speak, or as you listen to this show right now, there are probably 17 to maybe 22 helicopters that are on call, ready to go in 30 minutes. Fixed wing aircraft, probably 12 to 15 ready to go.
In what area? Nationwide?
Nationwide.
Okay.
All the way from Cape Cod, all the way down the East Coast, all the way around the Gulf Coast, up the West Coast, up into Alaska, including
Great Lakes.
Yeah. That whole area is, the Coast Guard is everywhere. And, that's
like Chicken Man.
Yeah. And
everywhere.
We're smaller than the New York City Police Department. Quinny had pointed that out when he was on. Yeah, right. And, yet we have 17 active missions that we do, and we're doing them real time. So, maybe sometimes our shoes aren't super spit polished, and that's because we're too busy, pulling people out of the water.
Bunch of slimy undisciplined.
And then, who was the other one I loved was our other rescue swimmer that we had on. He says, we've been at
Chief
war.
Morrissey.
Chief Morrissey. We've been at war with the boating public for, the last 200 years. And we'll be coming up on our 250th birthday very soon. And actually August is, I think it's August 12th is our Coast Guard birthday. So,
son of a, really? You're older than the Marines?
We are older. We are the oldest seagoing service in the United States. Because
you said August 12th? August 12th?
I want to say August 12th. I'm going to have to.
You mean you don't know?
I should know.
Fuck. Really? You don't know?
Yeah, you can pick on me.
You're a former Coast Guard officer and a helicopter pilot.
Semper Unparatus there,
Sticks. There you go.
Come on. I'm poking the bear here right now.
Yeah. Actually, I'll take it back.
But it is pretty unfucking
It's August 4th.
You don't know that.
Here's what's important is that is on August 4th or on the Saturday thereabouts there are multiple versions of Air Bowl being played, where the enlisted air crew versus the officer air crew go head to head in a game of football, often to get the officer's ass whooped. But
well, there's that.
Treacherous.
Any officer that goes against a trooper in a physical contest, the trooper's probably 6 to 8 years younger, 18, 19, in the best shape of his life.
Yep.
You need a judgment evaluation.
Yeah. But, we do it just the same. But, the thing, one of the other things that sort of leaped out at me is, there are people who are in distress, and, how are they getting help or reaching out for help? And obviously everybody has a cell phone. And what we've discovered early on is that we can get usually an address or a location for them, but then you need to translate that so I can use it in a helicopter. I need a lat long. So they've started using Google Earth or other map overlays that will allow them to, if they're this address, this is that lat and long, and they can then vector helicopters there. But the other thing to worry about is you've got towers, you've got wires, you've got, plus, trees, other debris that may be floating along. And so,
that was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about. How do you, who is now responsible essentially for looking for electrical wires that may be strung across the river, which you are flying formation on a victim floating downstream?
So it's usually going to be hopefully the safety pilot or the pilot, we refer to it as a safety pilot. It's not really the co-pilot, but the left seat pilot, hoist is usually done with the pilot at the right seat, but there have been some occasions where sometimes it needs to be done at the left seat. I've done them from the left seat, but the pilot that's not flying is going to be looking for those hazards, as is the flight mech. And once you get overhead, you're going to be sort of doing an overhead recon of the area where I'm going to be looking very closely for those hazards, the ones that are hopefully not going to take me down. But, that's, unfortunately, sometimes it does happen. What's interesting is I think it's more apt to happen when we're not looking for it. There was a Coast Guard H-60 that was doing a ferry flight back from Elizabeth City to Sitka, and they ran into some power lines over near in the Pacific Northwest, and unfortunately killed everybody on board. But there's always helo killers. We see them all the time, and we do our best to mitigate them. But they're there. And the other thing that we do is once a year we go out. When we fly these area familiarization flights, we're picking out what things are going to be a hazard, or where are we apt to be operating, what towers are there, what wires are there. So some of this will even be loaded into our database in the computer in the helicopter. So you'll be flying along and there's a little marker that says, hey, there's wires over here, by the way.
Yeah. And,
that AOR is not just out over water, but that AOR includes inland spaces, and that's for when I was at Air Station Atlantic City. So that goes from the Delmarva Peninsula north to the, basically Connecticut shore south, so from Delmarva to Connecticut shore, all of Long Island, and then in towards Philadelphia, Delaware, Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge area, and over time, flying a lot of missions in that area, you pick up, okay, there's this hazard here and that hazard there. And you sort of learn to just figure that out over time. And then there's once a year, there's a training. Usually when we do our safety stand downs, there's a area hazard brief that gets done. Usually one of the junior pilots gets assigned it. And you've got to, talk about what are the different hazards, what hospitals are in your area, where can you land, where can you take patients, who's, trauma patients can go here, burn patients can go there, that sort of stuff. So.
All right. One of the, I imagine in a river flood rescue situation, one of the big dangers is something you showed us on a video on one of the earlier shows, and I don't recall if I put that in the website or not. But how easy is it to drag your rescue swimmer and or the victim?
You mean
very
like
easy, and sometimes actually. It's also can be actually done as a matter of technique. So, what often happens.
You owe me $5.
Well, what often
not for that. Okay.
What we don't want to do is come in and pull them into the helicopter and out of the water at an angle. So what often will happen is we'll get in real close to them. The flight mech will, start taking in the slack, and we'll get the load on the helicopter. And then sometimes they dip them back into the water just for a second to sort of stabilize them.
Just to screw with them? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just to screw them. But no, it'll actually stabilize them so that as we're bringing them up, they're now plumb with the helicopter.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And the helicopter doesn't.
So they're not a big pendulum down there.
No, exactly. We don't want them swinging back and forth. That
or spinning. Talk about spinning. How do you prevent that?
Oh, yeah. So spinning, like in particular with the litter, I actually sent you guys a video at some point.
Yeah, it was horrible.
There was a rescue that was being done out in Arizona of a person who was in the litter, and when they were hoisting, what happened was the rotor wash started to spin the litter, and they're sitting up at they were hoisting from 40 or 50 feet. This poor woman that was in this litter started spinning at almost 150 RPMs a minute. And it was so bad afterwards. She actually had petechial or hemorrhages in her eyelids and her broken blood vessels in her eyes. She survived it, but it was pretty ugly. And so the way that we would typically prevent that is you're usually going to use a trail line. A lot of these hoists are best done safely with a trail line, and that trail line attaches to the hoist hook. There's a weak link in that, and then basically the trail line will then pass through either the litter or maybe the rescue basket. Usually not, the rescue basket's not as big of a hazard to spin, but you then pass that trail line through the foot of the litter. And now I've got one point that's fixed, and that'll prevent the litter from spinning around in circles. It's a super simple solution. And then if the line were to get snagged on something, the weak link in there is going to snap and break and prevent it from creating a dynamic rollover situation.
Okay.
So trail line.
You've mentioned that a couple times. What is a dynamic rollover? Explain what that is.
Yeah, so dynamic rollover. You have to imagine your helicopter. Back to my aerodynamics here. So actually,
don't you see your wristwatch there?
So your helicopter's here, but the helicopter is hanging underneath the rotor disc, and so. And what can often happen is that creates a moment, okay, and not a special connection moment between me and my flight mech, but although it will happen that way if we dynamically roll over. So what'll happen?
Kill me, I'll never speak to you again.
Exactly. So something will get stuck on the ground, or you'll have a point of contact on the ground, and then you create a rolling moment so that the helicopter starts to roll over to its side. And then once you get to a certain point, you're going to roll over. There's nothing that you can do about it. And typically the solution is either break contact with the ground or immediately lower the collective. Often, sometimes though, you're better off breaking contact with the ground. Immediately lowering the collective may create a moment rolling in the opposite direction, but it's a bit of a judgment call.
Oh.
But that's just one of those things. Another thing that can happen is something called ground resonance, and that's where the helicopter gets in contact with the ground, and you just get the right amount of vibration going between whatever you're on and the helicopter itself, that the helicopter literally shakes itself apart. That's also one of the hazards that can happen.
I thought they did that anyway.
Yeah. This is what makes FIGs scared at night and negotiating.
So what you just described seems to me like an every flight occurrence. The whole fucking thing shakes. It's just a matter of if it's all shaking in one direction. And you're saying there's a time when sometimes it doesn't go in one direction, and that's when it's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that can't be. Yeah.
I heard that.
Hey, so just remember, guns don't kill people. Helicopters kill people.
Yes.
But helicopters save people.
Well, they do that too. And guns save people.
Fact.
So there you go.
When you are staring down the barrel of a rushing river with chunks,
I'll take a helicopter ride.
And I'll take a helicopter. Of course, I won't personally because I've made a deal with God. But people that need to be rescued, thank the Lord, have helicopters that can get them out and hopefully don't kill them in the process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like I said, and I kind of go back a little bit to that moment when, I'm in flight school and I get the phone call from the SIGLO. Hey, Sticks or John, we're going to send you to Corpus, you're going to do fixed wing. Oh, no, I'm not. I'll quit. And, it's like, yeah, he thought, we had that discussion, and, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So, I wanted to be on the pointy end of the spear. What can I say?
Okay.
But, that's,
don't sit on the collective sticks.
Don't sit on the collective.
I'm proud of you. I'm glad you did that. I'm questioning your judgment, however. Seriously.
That's been throughout my life. I've questioned my judgment, but it's okay. Sometimes it's paid off. So.
As long as we're on the same page. Holy shit. So the other thing, so you said you got to be careful if you start getting a rollover. If you lower the collective, you can create a moment rollover in the other direction. You said break contact with the ground, but how? I mean, if you're pulling on something, how are you breaking contact? Do you have a way to release the hoist?
So sometimes you can shear the hoist. I mean, if that's what's creating that moment. But then the problem when you go to shear the hoist, you're now creating another pendulum effect, which again could have somewhat disastrous effects. So what's the thing is, it's about staying ahead of the aircraft. So if you're going to find yourself in that position, you may want to shear sooner rather than later. But when I'd say break contact with the ground, I'm talking about like you're sitting, a great example of this is a skidded helicopter that's coming in to land on a platform, like a ramp that they're going to then use to tow it into the hangar.
Right, yeah.
So if you're, really trying to be super precise about, I want it exactly in this spot. And if you get too precise with it and then you sort of get it down on there, and now all of a sudden you're light on the skids and just sort of trying to really finesse it into place as opposed to just getting it in the right place and putting it there on the first shot, you can create that moment where you're starting to roll. And if that's the case, you're going to basically take the cyclic, push it against the roll and pull pitch so that, as if I'm rolling this way, I'm going to create a moment that's going to go this way and I'm going to come up. So I break contact with whatever it is. And that tends to be more so where we see the dynamic rollover, so it's
like catching the skid on the lip of a step.
A great example of that is if you watched, there's a video of a frog coming into a Navy destroyer, I think. And I think they were doing like a rapid approach as though they were taking over the ship. And as they came in, the left rear main caught on the netting. And then they tried to pull to get out because they realized, okay, this isn't good. And as they were pulling to get out, they created a dynamic rollover. And they literally rolled right over, flipped upside down.
Right into the ship. I remember that.
So
horrific.
Yeah. It's no worse than watching all the Blue Angel videos where they killed themselves, So.
Yeah.
But so that's, I think, going back to, what the Coast Guard pulled off in Corpus and what, and that's just, you kind of had hit the nail on the head, I think, on one of the first episodes. It's Tuesday for them. This is what they do every day. And, my hope would be that, our general, those people who are listening to our show and hopefully hear this, the next time you see a coastie or you see a pilot or something, you don't have to buy them coffee. You don't have to do anything special, but just say, I've heard stories about what you guys do and I appreciate what you do. Because those guys are the entire air crew, our flight mechs, our swimmers, our pilots are amazing Americans and, putting their life on the line every day. It's like they're like somewhere a cross between a police officer, a firefighter, and our military. And that's sort of when you really get into the mindset of what a coastie is and what we do. On a nutshell, I think you'll find that a lot of them are what I would, they're selfless, and that's what they thrive on. They go and they do what they do because it's an opportunity to help somebody else. And
well, in that episode with Quinny really brought it home to me for the first time. And then Chief Morrissey solidified it. These guys are, they're elite. They're not slouches. These guys are Olympic level athletes, special forces type.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I would say is our flight decks.
So hang on just a second, if you would, Stick. So Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable is episode 156. That's with Quinny. And that was our first rescue swimmer. And thanks for getting him for us, Sticks.
Yep.
And our next one was with Chief Morrissey. Thank you. Oh, my brain hurts. And that was episode 165. Go Hunters, Jet Jocks, and a $3,000 rifle. Yeah. So these guys, man, they hang it all out there. And it's amazing. They couldn't hang it out there if the pilots weren't out there putting them out there to let them do it and teach them.
Yeah, and it's a Tuesday for them. It's not a special exercise. It's not it's not a deployment. It's a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, and it was 4th of July when this whole disaster unfolded down in Texas, and those were duty crews who were on duty, away from their family. Barbecue, missing barbecues, missing hanging out with their kids and stuff like that.
On the 4th of July, yeah.
Because that's their job. I've spent Christmas and Thanksgiving and, Easter, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, all of those holidays, especially in the summer months when everybody loves to go out on the water, they're going to work and going to pull people out of the water or take them to a hospital when they need to get there because something didn't go right. And, this is what they do every day. And in terms of funding and recognition, the Coast Guard gets a fraction. I think a United States aircraft carrier, no offense to Nasty, you could pretty much run the Coast Guard on that budget virtually. And yet on a day in, day out basis, they're saving hundreds of lives.
And that's a good point. But let's look at it's not under the Department of Defense.
Right.
The Coast Guard is under, it used to be under the DOT. Now it's under
Homeland Security. Homeland Security, right. That's right.
Yeah. And it's different bucket of money altogether.
It's been under Commerce. It's been all over the place. It's the one agency that keeps getting moved all over the place. The reason why, and, Project 2025 brought up the suggestion, the idea that, we need to move the Coast Guard into the Pentagon, and you cannot do that. The reason being,
posse comitatus, right?
Exactly. Coast Guard is a law enforcement agency, and that's a whole nother thing that the aviation community is doing. And we now have armed helicopters that are interdicting drugs and intercepting aircraft that are flying into Washington D.C.
So how about that? Can you speak a little about that? Because I don't think.
That's the first time we've ever touched on that. That's cool stuff.
I need to work on. I need to get somebody. I'm going to try and get somebody from the Blackjack Squadron to come in, and actually know some. I'll reach out to somebody. But so after 9/11, there was a need for intercepting slow flyers. So the big jets that were coming into DC, we had F-16s and aircraft that were capable of intercepting those. But, a Cessna that's bombing into the DC area is not going to be able to be intercepted by an F-16 very well. So a combination of the Coast Guard and the U.S. Customs started a program which is basically for protecting the air defense identification zone. There is a zone that's around Washington, D.C., and it's protected by the Coast Guard and occasionally, I think, Customs. And the whole idea, and these guys actually have a 5-minute launch window. And they immediately take off. They're located at DCA. And what'll happen is they will fly up, intercept an aircraft. And the way that this is done, it's kind of cool because I get to be like a fighter pilot now. There's usually three different intercept scenarios. And you can either come in head to head, and then, or you can come in a beam of your target, or it can be a tail chase. Tail chase for a helicopter is going to be awful hard to catch up. And that's usually the scenario where we may lose, or it's like watching paint dry, because we're going to have a closure rate of like 15 knots or so. The H-65 can do, max pulling max power. And I think they reduced the gas on board to sort of improve that, but you can probably do about 150 knots, give or take. But the most interesting scenario is the head to head. And when you're coming in head to head, what has to happen is I want to get myself on the other side of this aircraft, and I want to be parallel to them so that I can flash a sign at them and let them know that, you've been intercepted and you need to follow me. But I need to do that without losing any energy, because I need to come up on the other side of them at the same airspeed. So really what it comes down to is a fancy rotor over. And we're going to come in, we're going to be sort of parallel. You're going to pitch up about 45 to 50 degrees. And you're going to climb up to about 1,200 feet until you come up to about 60 knots. And then you're going to come over, and then you're going to come back down on the other side. But the crazy thing about exactly. So we're coming and you're screaming down on the other side. And we practice this with the air auxiliary.
You're describing a high yo-yo.
Okay. All right. So, and it's an energy management maneuver is the way that we would think of it.
Yeah.
But to really be effective at this, this is the one and only time that you split the controls. So the pilot that is on the side of the approaching aircraft is going to have the cyclic, where the pilot on the other side that's away from the approaching aircraft is going to have the collective, and you're going to be pulling max pitch. And that's the safety pilot's job, is to call out airspeeds, altitudes, and maintain maximum pitch on the collective, because that's our speed. As you're coming across the top, the controls swap. And actually, no, you're pretty much going to stay on that. And
I just threw up a little bit in my mouth.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. One guy's got one control.
Yep.
And the other guy's got the other control. And halfway through this thing,
no, actually, we don't. I was thinking we swap. We don't, because the guy that's on the side of the helicopter,
too late. I already
the aircraft, you're going to be coming down on the other side, but you are splitting the controls, and that's so that you can maintain, that positive power.
I'm sorry I asked you that question. Now I'm sorry, because now I'm going to have nightmares thinking about this scenario. Yeah. Please tell me this wasn't an everyday thing for you guys.
No, but I trained up for this. It was shortly before I was getting out, and it was the funnest friggin' maneuver ever. That's like, you kind of do start, and you have to put all of this together, because you're getting vectors from Giant Killer, usually, who's, Giant Killer is the Air Force who are watching this. And so they're going to be calling out, your bogey dope, altitude, airspeed. And
I wish Kimo was here to listen.
Yeah. But he might be shocked to hear that the Coast Guard's talking bogey dope and air intercept, but
oh my gosh.
But yeah, no, we actually, trained up for that. And it was the most fun I've done. Not, in terms of just fun. It's a little stressful.
Flying.
But it's fun. It's fun as shit. And, it was the one thing I was, I kind of like this. The thing that made me apprehensive a touch was, okay, I may end up having to shoot somebody down, but, and it's the only reason I was.
So you've got a cannon on board, or do you get a 50 cal in the back?
Now they got a 50 cal in the back. And, the thing that I think about in that perspective is most likely what we're going to be intercepting is somebody who wasn't paying attention to the ADIZ and, busts the airspace and now is getting intercepted.
ADIZ.
And Air Defense Identification Zone.
There you go.
So
they're going to be getting calls if they're listening on guard.
Yeah.
Hey, dumbass, identify yourself and turn away.
And they're going to get all sorts of calls. They're going to get, and believe me, I've been that guy. On September 13th, flying out of DC, all of a sudden we changed our squawk code. And next thing you know, I've got my own personal air show from the United States Air Force.
You probably met Lucky for the first time.
Yeah. Lucky or what are these Coast Guard morons doing here?
Yeah. Or Raisin, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, probably was on your wing.
Yeah. There you go.
So, okay.
Oh, shit. All right. So
I'm not going to sleep well.
No.
Thank you for that description.
Shit's terrifying.
It's any consolation, Pete, or Fig. I'm going to sleep just fine.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So this is actually one of my questions, and we've said it a couple of times now. I wrote it down, which is on a scale from just another Tuesday to hell no, where does a nighttime rescue on a flooded river come in? Because I know they were not stopping just because the sun went down.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, that's, to me, if I were, I'm taking myself and I'm saying, okay, I'm hypothetically putting myself there at Corpus Christi and saying, okay, where would my apprehension level be? I would be sitting probably at like an 8 to a 9. And it's not what I can't see that would have me really worried. And,
right.
I would be wanting to and having done that, River Gorge rescue at night, we studied and looked at the aeronautical charts, did, very detailed overhead recon. We had pretty good data that there wasn't a whole lot of obstacles there, but a situation, like that in Corpus, trying to fly at night, especially, I would be, that's just the risks there are compounded exponentially. It's what you can't
totally
see that's going to take you down.
Hey, things that go bump in the night, huh?
Right. Yeah. And then now you're part of the rescue.
Exactly. Now you're to be rescued, and
you're part of the operation instead of being on the rescue end.
Yep. And up in, I think it was Air Station Sitka, they had about a year and a half ago, they had an H-60 that was doing a rescue in a small cove where they were being pushed in, and they were trying to put a pump down on the boat. And they backed into some trees and took the helicopter down.
Ooh.
And it's just, you think you got that extra 5 feet or 10 feet or 20 feet, and you don't. It's so.
What? Okay.
Was that also at night? Was that at night?
That was a rescue at night. Fortunately, everybody survived. There were some injuries. But it just paints, I think, illustrates just how dangerous the job is.
Boy.
And all the more reason why we should be thankful for those people who are doing that job. And again, like I said, I am the lowest common. As I'm just looking here, keep saying Corpus Christi. I know that the rescue crew was based. However, the places So Steve Morowitz had pointed out that the rescues took place in Kerrville, which is correct. But the air crews, when I refer to Corpus Christi, I'm referring to the air crews that came out of Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
There was also probably air crews that came out of Houston as well.
So you guys threw around the number 60 and 65 a lot back when Chief Morrissey was on. So the Sikorsky 60 Jayhawk was the original bird. Do they even fly those in anymore? Are they all 65s?
So no, they're still flying both 60 and 65s.
Okay. Who determines who gets the weak bird?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of it is driven by where air station needs are, and also station preference. So like when you're coming out of flight school, I don't think they say, oh, well, the better pilots are going to get 60s and the weaker pilots get 65s or something like that. I think it's largely based upon what air station you're sent to. And it's, in that case, I think it's more luck of the draw than anything else. But the current state of Coast Guard aviation is that we have the H-65 and the H-60. H-65, there are currently, I want to say, between 85 to 92 of them that are in service. There we go. This is what I affectionately refer to as Tupperwolf. Looks like it's made out of Tupperware, and it sounds like Airwolf.
Yeah. And is that because of the ducted tail rotor?
Yeah, it's that fan and fin fenestron that's in the back. And that tail fin in the back there, that is one big-ass barn door. And what's cool about that, though, is it's cambered. So on one side, it's flat, and the other side, it's got an airfoil. So when we're in forward flight, a lot of my anti-torque effect is coming off of that tail fin. And when you also look on the tail, there are 2 additional vertical stabilizers that are on the side, which provide a little bit of additional stability. And then the horizontal stabilizer that's in the back is like a reverse airfoil. So it's flat on top, cambered on the bottom. So yeah, if you're looking, you'll see on the side, there's those 2 smaller ones. Those are angled in such a way that they help provide some of that anti-torque effect. And then what's attaching to them from
so it's a vertical wing in forward flight to keep the airplane from trying to twist on you.
Right.
It's a rudder.
Yeah, where it's a brilliant design. It really is. And then you've got that horizontal stab in the back that's cambered, that's pulling down on the tail, which pulls the nose up so that where the helicopter would have a tendency to fly nose down, it's going to fly more level as you gain more forward flight.
Okay.
So, because what you have to imagine is this whole fuselage that's sitting underneath the rotor disc is like a pendulum. So it's just hanging there, and it literally, it's the rotor disc, it's the rotor blades that are flying, and the helicopter itself is hanging underneath. It just sort of like imagine a string with a ball hanging on it, and that's what's hanging underneath the rotor.
Big old pendulum underneath.
That's,
okay. All right.
Fucking terrifying. Thank you for that description.
But
hey, can I ask you a question with the picture up? So on top of the rotor mast, there's a
little
vertical
egg beater looking thing.
Yeah. So what the hell is that?
Looks like a water valve for a golf course
periscope.
Actually,
irrigation system.
What that is basically an anemometer, and it's able to, when we're in a
What's
hover,
with the big words? Damn it! Stop it.
Yeah.
So that's
is it a sprinkler head or not? Is it a sprinkler head or not? Yes or no?
Not a sprinkler head.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Yeah.
That's all.
When we're in a hover, that's able to tell me if I'm moving forward, left, right, because we have a hover page where it's basically like an overhead view that gives me a vector if I'm moving left, right, forward, and then it has a little ticker tape on the side that tells me my altitude as well.
Interesting, because I would think there's so much damn wind getting sucked down into those rotor blades, but it's relatively calm there.
In the middle there, it's calm enough that you can actually use that to detect. It's one of the sensors. It's the H-65 Echo model now actually has an inertial navigation system as well. So because the original question was like 60 versus 65. So 60, it's what we refer to as the big iron. It is a big, beefy helicopter. Like I think Chief Morrissey had said, or maybe it was Quinney, God's chariot. It is a beast of a helicopter with lots of power. The Navy version of this aircraft is loaded up with so much equipment that they need all that power, and they're, probably flying on the margins. The H-60 Jayhawk is a flying gas can. If you look, those torpedo-looking things there, that's all extra fuel. I think they've got about a 4 to a 5 hour fuel capability.
So those aren't drop tanks, though? They're attached?
They don't. Yeah, we don't drop those. They're not torpedoes either, so... But, when I was coming out of flight school, I really wanted to fly the 60, they got big beefy helicopter, lots of power, but when I got to the 65, we were initially had these smaller engines. They were underpowered, and, you're literally, don't even have a 10% power reserve when I'm pulling up into a hover. So this was the Alpha model.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. Oh, good. All right. I'm glad you cleared that up. I thought the 60 was underpowered and the 65 was...
No, 65 was way underpowered.
Okay.
And in a nutshell, the comparison I would make is it's like David and Goliath, okay? The H-60 was a super powerful helicopter, but it was dumb as a friggin' rock. The 65 was like, you could pull that thing into a hover. It could transition out into forward flight. I could take it out, go fly a search pattern, come back, do a coupled ILS, and put the helicopter into a stable hover pretty much hands off if I wanted.
Damn. All right. Well, very cool.
Yeah. I mean, you literally, if I put this on a coupled ILS approach and just let it fly the glide slope down and had T-HUV armed, T-HUV will capture and it will bring the helicopter into a hover, and I can literally push a button that will bring the helicopter down in 3-foot increments until I touch it down. So
it sounds like flying your drone.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a big poise there, Fig. So with that, you're bored.
I'm about to. I was going to say something, and I'm checking myself. I'm not going to say it.
Oh no! Unload. Come on.
No. I want to go back.
Okay.
You started talking about all this fancy Wizmo, couple it up, ILS, button pushing, and all that. Back to the sprinkler head that's on top of the mast in the picture that does all these things for you. When you're in the hover, I was always under the assumption that you were picking a spot to hover off of.
Yeah. No,
and of course, I get it if you're out in open water and there's waves and wind and all that. So is that when that really comes into play?
So
when you really don't have a spot to focus on?
So that's there, but there is limits to what this system could do. Okay. I would not rely, honestly, I did not rely on this system at all to hover, to, put me in a stable hover over the water at night. It could do that. Okay. That's what the system was designed to. It would work better when it was over land and if it wasn't like really rough seas. But if I've got swells underneath me and, that helicopter is pitching up and down, as it's pulling pitch on the collective, the tail's now rotating and then I'm going to start rolling. And you really are going to be flying. You really kind of fly through it in a way. You may use it, but you're it's just there to help reduce your workload a little bit. There's two modes, at least when I was flying, there was T-HOV, which is basically a coupled hover. And then there's HOV-AUG or hover augmentation. And that would just sort of help maintain a steady altitude. That worked better. And I tend to, if I was going to be using a system, that's what I would tend to be using. But it's tough to, but it's by comparison from the H-60 to H-65. That's the primary reason I was just drawing that comparison is that the helicopters were very different and the communities were a little different because the H-65 is so underpowered. We really became experts at power management. I could go out and I could literally fly this helicopter right to the edge of what it could do because that's what I had to do. The 60 guys, if they had they would be running away scared if they had to go out with a 10% power margin and do swimmer ops. So,
damn.
Right, so here's the takeaway. I heard a lot of talking, saying things that make me nervous, and I'm probably going to have nightmares over some of the shit that I've heard in the last 57 minutes come out of your mouth hole. But the bottom line is, if you're in a roaring river or stuck in a tree and you're going to die and a helicopter shows up overhead, regardless of whether it's got the sprinkler
on top,
it's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And the guys, especially the guys that are flying that and that are operating the hoist and that are coming down in the tree to get you. Yeah, they got balls like King Kong,
right?
Yeah,
and it's a Tuesday for them.
They have a hard time carrying around their anatomy, whether it be ovaries or other.
It's not. It's when I say big balls, that's a gender neutral. They can have ovaries as a right.
So
absolutely.
I will point out that one of the pilots on this mission that they flew in Corpus, one of them was
female.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And again, it's, and I flew with some amazing female pilots and, they were every bit as capable as any of my male cohorts. And I flew with one of those.
Doesn't that just piss you off, man? Right. Oh, better. No, they're not. Damn
it. It's having the other, there's just a lot there.
Look, as a child who grew up in a family of the 50s and 60s, man, better at this stuff.
Yeah. It's
hard.
It's hard. It's hard to hear that.
All right. I was wrong.
I fly with female pilots all the time. And
so do I.
Some of them, I prefer them over some of the dudes I've flown with because they're actually good pilots.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, better
Some
yet.
are better than me. Ooh, did I say that out loud? Damn it.
As a rule of thumb, I tended to see them more. They're better team players. They listen well and they work well together. Their CRM capabilities, I think, at times are much better, and they don't come in with a chip on their shoulder or an ego chat. An ego.
I haven't run into. I don't want to say any, because I'm sure I might have deleted one, but to my recollection, they're generally don't have an ego issue. They got, It is what it is
Yeah.
with them.
I'm going to step into some dangerous territory here and just say, look, over the years, of all the women I've flown with at my company, 2 were buffoons, and the rest were far above average, if not more so. Yeah. And one didn't even know it. She was so bad, but that's a story for another. It's actually a pretty funny story.
I can say
for another day.
This goes back 20 years, but
yeah,
I was speaking recency of experience.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
These were pilots that had come out of the military and then obviously had proven themselves in the military over and over. And, when you're a female pilot in the military, you got to be better than the dudes.
You do. Absolutely, you do.
And it's not fair, but they have to be.
Right.
And they are.
And generally were. Yeah. They just were. Yeah. And of the 2 buffoons that I mentioned, long since gone. Yeah. Anyway.
And that's probably a good thing too.
Yeah, it is. It is.
For everybody.
Both are retired. And lest one of them, one of the best pilots I've ever flown with was a woman, and she is also retired, not a buffoon. She knows who she is, an amazing pilot, saved an airplane that should have ended in a fireball.
Oh, yeah. But I know who you're talking about.
So,
rhymes with Ronnie. Call sign Bonnie.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm talking at my company. Yeah. Bonnie, we had on the show. She hit me and nerves of steel. An amazing aviatrix, to use a sexist term. A sexist would say. But anyway, damn. All right. Somebody dig me out of the hole into which I have dug myself. I'm going to stop digging.
I'll put the hoist hook down. Rescue check part 2 for recovery.
So in the theme of trying to keep our podcast under control time-wise, I think we should probably wrap this bitch up.
We really should. Any closing stories of hilarity, stupidity, and or self-inflicted?
No, actually, I've got one where it was kind of cool. So we were going out to go do a medevac, and it was a dive emergency, and we're in the Del Bay. So Delaware State Police also get dispatched, and they literally, I think they beat us on scene by maybe about 5 or 10 minutes. And, they all of a sudden we arrive on scene, and I swear to God, I am convinced I am watching a disaster unfold in front of me. So they come up with the idea that, okay, they're now they have 2 paramedics on board that they picked up, and they're not hoist capable, not hoist equipped. And so what they ended up doing was they used the rope to lower their gear down to the boat because they didn't want to get that wet. So we watch them it's like watching the Keystone Cops now, because they're literally approaching. We're sitting into the wind, and I'm watching this, Maryland State Police, which is a Bell 206 Jet Ranger, over the water. And we look and we notice they're not equipped with floats. And they're like at 35 feet over the water, putting the medic's gear down. And then I get these 2, let's just say weeble wobble shaped paramedics that we watch now free fall out of the helicopter into the water and then swim to the boat.
Wait,
so how did they drop them from?
They just free fell out.
They just jumped off the skid into the. Literally watch now.
And the Russian judge gave him what? I mean, the belly flop, swan dive. Come on, man, help us out.
I'm sitting out there with the other pilot, and we're watching this unfold, and we're like 2 guys sit. It was almost, if you could have had a camera behind us, it would have been like watching 2 guys doing like a review. Oh, that was terrible. Better yet, it was like the Muppets. The 2 old guys,
Waldorf and Statler,
the beginning
up in the box.
Didn't like that free fall deployment.
Look at that idiot.
Yeah. Oh, it was painful to watch. They fortunately both got onto the boat, and then we talked to the state police helicopter who was in communications with them, and the decision was made. They're going to just ride the boat in with the patient. We're like, that's probably a good idea. So Two lives saved, and it wasn't the guy that was on the boat.
I thought you were going to say they decided they needed to be rescued off the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think they need. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they ever did that maneuver again. I think they kind of realized as soon as they jumped out of the helicopter that they were over their head.
Yeah. Well, there you go. All right. Last quick question. Water. Who does one have authority over the other? When you guys showed up, could you say we got it? Or do they have authority over, or is it first come, first serve?
It was kind of, I don't think there's any rule. I think it would be something that would kind of be worked out between both aircraft. What I can say is, they were the first there. So they get, in that case, they kind of get on scene command. And,
okay.
So it's, and it's like, okay, they got better capabilities medically, but, clearly it was like, from my perspective, having done more than my fair share of hoists, it was like watching the Keystone Cops. So
too bad you just couldn't say, boys, why don't you let the professionals take over? This is what we do. Why don't you go find some speeders?
Yeah. And it was,
and drop a rescue swimmer on them.
And drop an EMT on them.
Yeah,
it was an EMT on a speeder.
They didn't even have rescue swimmers. They just had some EMT
just an EMT.
Right. I didn't even, it was funny. They had their shoes on and everything.
Oh,
they quite literally as if they were coming in off the street, all right, we're jumping in.
Well, God bless them.
I think we just got the show title right there. They had their shoes on and everything.
So, but anyways, I will add one quick thing, and that is, to all of our, God bless all of our armed services, their families, and those people who have made sacrifices so that they can serve. But I'm going to put a special emphasis for tonight's show. Obviously, I'm biased, but on our United States Coast Guard. There is no finer group of individuals that I ever had the privilege of working with who on a day in, day out basis were selfless, more selfless than the Coast Guard.
Yep.
And I am honored, privileged to have said that I, served 11 years very proudly with them. So Semper Paratus, and God bless the United States Coast Guard. God bless the United States of America. And of course, I'm not going to leave out the Marine Corps. God bless the United States Marine Corps.
Well said, sir. Thank you.
There you go. Nicely done. Yeah, indeed. And thank you for your service, Sticks. Much appreciated.
Yep. As always. Thank you.
We got a couple other quick thank yous. First and foremost, and he's here with us, is Dizzy, who is apparently in a state of mental breakdown and threw over $400 at us this week for $35. I think.
Judgment. Thank you. We are humbled.
Yeah.
You are one of the reasons we're back on StreamYard, sir. So thank you.
You are. So, what were you thinking, Dizzy? But thank you.
Thank you, Dizzy.
God bless you.
It would be nice to go back to my little role in the producer seat. So
yes, we want you back.
Yeah. And Jim Bosworth last week, I think we mentioned it in the preamble last week, $500 last week was quite a shock. So,
Huge.
Keeping the show coming to you guys. And I think all our tech problems should be well behind us. And I'll sort this echo bullshit out on the music. But, Mox Nix, hey, would you go over to solerawas.us/rate and follow the prompts and give us a 5-star rating, please? Count on 5.
Yeah. If you can't give us 5, then tell us why.
Yeah.
Because we're trainable. No. And share the show.
Give us 5 and tell us what we did wrong. We'll take it under advisement and get it better. So we're trainable. Yeah.
Share the
show. This is a great example here. We're back on StreamYard.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So, thank you to you, Sticks. Bago's coming back. He's dealing with sick kids at home tonight, or as Sticks calls it, a Tuesday. People puking on him.
That's my Tuesday now in my current job.
People hurling on you. So.
Yeah. It's okay.
solerawas.us/merch. We don't mention that enough or something, because that is, we haven't had any sales really in almost 2 months. So get on there. Get yourself a bikini.
You got a Solerawas bikini that looks good on the right figure.
You know
what I'm saying? Not on me. Repeat can pull it off, though.
I try not to, but I'm not going to pull off my bikini for you,
Just
Fig.
saying,
Sorry.
I know repeat well enough, and the answer is negative. You can wave that one.
TMI.
Yeah. Thank you to Badass, BDSAviationPhotography.com, letting us use your images. Deeply appreciative of that. And giveaway, SoleraWas.us/giveaway. It's almost up, a few more days, and you can go win yourself a copy of Takeoffs and Landings by Alger Pete Peterson, who spent 30 years in the Air Force from the 50s through the 80s. So, and his grandson Dusty gave us those books, so we can give them on to you just for doing what? Sharing.
Share the show.
Share the show.
Share the show.
Share the show.
Yeah. SoleraWas.us/giveaway. And that's it. Oh, those two other people. Their music's been playing a little bit in the background here. What's your
Could be the dose.
both of them?
Those are the two. Those are the two Dos Gringos F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound good. 4 albums, not a bad one. They were recently in Denver, where you went.
Yeah.
And had
Wings Over the Rockies.
Wings Over the Rockies. Long story short, there was some challenges with the audio, but still a lot of good stories.
There were some good stories in there. So, until next week, don't sit on the collective.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
What did he say?
He said it's over.
I just want to tell you both, good luck. We're all counting on you.
And we are out.